Check, quick sound check. Can everybody hear me loud and clear? What's going on, Coach Paul?
Check, double check. Safety, punt, no tell. Or
Discount
maybe
double
I'm
check.
dating myself. Discount double check. Welcome back, everyone.
Audio video is good. Thank you, Andrew. Welcome back. Happy Monday, everyone. Hopefully, everybody had a good weekend and a good start to your week. How was your weekend, Coach Paul?
Great. A lot of football, pumpkin
S-
carving,
Okay,
hay rides. I did the classic fall weekend with my
nice.
son and my grandson. So it was
Awesome. Sounds
awesome.
like a very, very October weekend.
It
Um,
was. How about yourself?
Uh, my weekend was relaxing. My younger brother who just started college this year, they had a family day, so we all kind of went out there on Saturday, and then Sunday was just a chill day. Just a chill day, kind of getting ready, just getting rested and getting ready for the week. Let me mute those Slack notifications so the chat doesn't hear all of that. But happy to be back. So welcome back everyone to At the Buzzer, our market recap. If this is your first time here, I'm Coach Jay. That is Coach Paul. The goal of this segment is to review what happened in the markets for the day. We may talk about some markets that you have not traded before, but we believe our goal as traders is to identify opportunity, see how we could have taken advantage of those opportunities while managing our risk. Uh, if this is our first time meeting, I'm Coach Jay. I've been a Topstep Performance Coach since June of 2023. Been trading for the past 12 years and been in the futures markets for the past 5. And that is Coach Paul. You may have seen him on Topstep TV earlier today, but Coach Paul, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Coach Paul. I've been with Top Step for a year and a half as a performance coach. I have 4 decades of experience in the futures industry. 25 of the last years trading futures. Here to help, share my experiences and perhaps wisdom and assist our traders in becoming better traders.
Listen, thank you for that, Coach. Not too much as far as scheduled news goes today. We know we had Dallas Fed index number coming out. We had some note auctions as well. I think the biggest news over the weekend and what may have caused all of the gaps potentially um, was Israel attacking Iran. I know you had a comment on that while we were in the green room, Coach. So, um, anything you want to
Yeah.
say on that?
Yeah. I happen on my swing account, I was long crude. I had hedged it with a short call, but when I saw the news, my expectations were higher crude prices. Um, and I was wrong. Um, Crude opened up $4 lower. So why I bring that up, I took my loss. And but why that the important thing is news and expectations. The expectation was, there's missiles flying at Iran. Um, that should be bullish for crude, except they didn't hit the oil fields. And yeah, I wouldn't have expected $4 lower, but that's
Dramatic move.
yeah. I'm glad I sold some calls against it. By the way, and this goes in position sizing. I didn't have a very large position. I lost well within my means, but key point is if you're following the news with an expectations that the market should do X, you could be very disappointed. And if you over leverage, here day trade, small account, big account. If you're over leveraged and you don't have room to be wrong, you're very vulnerable to blowing up an account. So I took my loss um, and moved on. So
Yeah, well, we were talking, Coach. Kind of going into because I think some of those headlines started coming out when we were finishing at the buzzer on Friday, and I had the same thought. It was just like, oh, well, if that is the case, then I would want to be long crude as well. At this point, I'm done trading, but yeah, you wouldn't expect that. But then when the headline comes out and says, the oil reserves are okay, then you see the market reaction to it. So let's get into the charts. I will pull up the quote board as soon as I find out which one. There it is. Let's look at the top percentage movers on the day. We did have some big percentage movers, especially in the energies. To the downside, we have RBOB gasoline futures down 4.92%, crude oil down 5.31%, and nat gas, our biggest percentage mover to the downside, at 8.02%. What's going on, Coach?
We were talking about natural gas Friday.
Yes, we
Uh,
were.
to, and that didn't really gap. That just went when it got out of the opening range last night. I short armed that because I was a little sensitive. But yeah, I feel like I lost money selling it, but it was a huge, huge move. And like we talked, it's how many times do we mention natural gas and percentage movers? Almost every
Um,
day.
feels like every day.
So
Feels like every day.
yeah, that was
Uh, And then to the upside, we had lean hogs up 1.13%, the Nikkei up 1.36%, and the Russell, our biggest percentage mover to the upside, at 1.54%. To round out our big four, we have the S&Ps up 0.3%, the Nasdaq up 0.05%, and gold pretty much unchanged, up 0.01%. And we already talked about uh, crude oil.
crude.
Where do we want to start, Coach? I think starting in the energies is not a bad idea since those were the big movers on the day. Let's go to crude oil.
Okay.
Crude oil, we're on a 30-minute chart. Here's the open, and
And
go ahead, Coach.
yeah, um, with a big gap like that, um, what was the range after that was like a dollar. Um, and I don't big gaps like that for day trading. I usually just stay away. Um, it's really kind of the market has reset, so to speak. So let's look at the action. Dramatic. What was it? That range in a half hour bar. I mean, it opened up $4 lower on that spike, but stayed with look at that, stayed within that range and meandered lower the rest of the day.
Interesting. That was the case for a lot of these markets, like you said, the gap down. The one thing I want to measure out here is the gap. So we had settlement in crude oil on Friday at 71.78, and maybe just a gap to mark out on our charts. Because at some point you would think the market fills this gap. And I would want to know when we're starting to test that gap, right? So the high of the gap, 71.78. Let's go with a fib tool so we know where 50% is as well. And where we opened up, 68.99, pretty much just call it 69 even, is the high of that gap. And 50% of it is 70.39. So I'd be watching these prices as crude, trades back up to the 69 area. Does it test this gap, accept back inside of it, and then potentially trade through it? Um, Coach, what's really interesting? We talked about that article on Friday, and we talked about the big selling that we saw in crude. Sorry, big buying that we saw in crude on that spike on Friday, and it stopped at that $72 level. That article that we had from the White House that said, where the U.S. was going to be buying oil reserves or filling oil reserves, $67 to $72. The low of the
That
low of
was
the day
the
was $67.
Yeah, very interesting you brought that up. I remember that last night. Um, so does it hold here? Well, it hasn't so far, but we don't know. This tonight's opening should be interesting, but it was a great article, and the bottom line, there's plenty of crude oil available in the market. There's no shortage of it. Um, as we see, uh, so. Um, I don't know else to say there and over analyze it, but we'll find a balance somewhere, and I imagine we'll turn around and start slowly going back. But crude has, if we bring up the daily, isn't this the bottom of our yearly range?
On the daily now, the bottom of the year is 63.50, lows of the year. So we got about $5 before we hit that. D is saying in the chat there's room down to 65, and I could see that as well. Um,
We could get there tonight.
yeah, we could open up there, um, depending on how some of these headlines go. Uh, but yeah, very interesting market here. With that gap, do we just continue lower? We know we were talking about these yearly lows in September being very high time frame lows. I think we were going back 4 or 5 years on a crude oil. Maybe not that long, because if we go back too long, then we're negative in crude oil. But multi-year lows in crude here.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. On top of all the other developments in this world,
Right.
and once again, I'm going to go back to that. Yeah, my suggestion, I mentioned it today on Top Step TV. Coming into next week, pare down on your size, get your risk. There's a very high probability of like air pockets that can crush you. I
What do you
consider
mean by
this
air pockets, coach?
air pockets like crude. Now, this was overnight, but it blew up on a range uh, like that. So, air pockets, and there's different types of volatility. And one of the volatilities is extreme choppy markets where it's rallying and like a crude. Let's take S&P. You could just the bids get pulled, so to speak, or liquidity is taken out by market makers. They go down, they pare their sizes down from being 100 up, just for an example, down to 10.
Right. Now,
And then
me and you are
suddenly,
trading against each other.
yeah, yeah, that's right. And all of a sudden, that's when the air pocket, all of a sudden, in a natural move, it just drops 20 handles. Like, and we're all searching for the news. Well, some
News
big
is no one's trading.
buyer seller came in, and no one, there wasn't enough uh, liquidity on the other side. That's what I mean by air pockets. And those are worse than just pure. To me, like, but that's a swing trade into crude. I sized it out, and I survived it. But if you, this is why I say size down. If you put on too much, and all of a sudden there's just it's turbulence. If you've ever been on a plane with high turbulence, you know what I mean. And it's like I just want to get off, but you can't. So to survive, pare down your size. The number one principle is to save the account or survive. So I can see a lot of that coming down the pipe here.
It's good. Well, like you said, coach, outside of that gap down, the range was pretty tight in crude oil after that. We can see from last night, anchored VWAP from the session open, Globex open, stayed in the range the entire time. We did have somewhat of a bounce off of this $67 level on the crude oil open, which is 8 a.m. Central Time here. Uh, this is a decent trade if you're trading just the New York session, where we had volume leave the range pretty early. And I'm going to mute my Discord notifications now as well too. Uh, give me 1 second with that.
Echo,
Uh,
echo, echo.
how do I do that? We should be good. But leaving the range here, leaving that 3 minute opening range to start the New York session, if you will, provided a decent trade, traded up into the gap. Um, not accepting price into that. Actually, no, that was not the gap. That was trading back into the 30-minute session open, uh, but not a lot of price action after that gap down.
Yeah. And tomorrow's a new day. So um that was what else is there to say?
Not much. Let's move on to Nat Gas, which gap down, but then did give us some movement in during the session. I don't know what got it into that gas, but it was a pretty big sell here. Uh, this was probably the closest to an urgency trade that we did get, and we call it urgent, but it didn't happen until around 4:30, 5 o'clock Central Time. But we have 30-minute opening range mapped out here in Nat Gas.
Yeah, and that's one thing. This is U.S. natural gas. It might even be a bigger market, at least in futures terms, in Europe. Um, but look what we did. We gapped down and went what? Sideways inside that opening range. But wow. I did sell it on a stop. I woke up and I feel like I lost money. I just,
Was getting out too early.
oh yeah,
Mm.
I have alligator arms on that one.
It
Yeah.
happens, right? We never
But
know it's going to do this. If there is a market that has the potential to do this, I feel like it is nat gas, right? Where we've seen some double digit percentage days, but you don't know, especially on a day trade, you don't know which one it's going to be. Um, Coach, I got a question for you. With these
yeah.
gaps, how do you normally trade them, right? Are you seeing a gap down and saying, I want to go in the direction of the gap, or are you looking for gap fills, or does it depend?
I go with the direction of the longer term trade.
Gotcha.
So even at we had big rallies in natural gas. On a daily, it's still under the 200 bar moving average, and it's been that way for seems like since I had hair, long time. And so that gap, I would take that gap. I looked at that. I'm like, wow, this could really get hit. But I took the sell. Um, and I covered earlier this morning. Um, and by the time the U.S., I mean the 8 o'clock New York Open, it just fell, and I'm like, well, I'm not chasing it. So it was a great trade. Look at that. That's a classic. But look at the VWAP. I mean, what else do you need to know? It's so let's go think about that. You said we gapped lower. We stayed the VWAP inside the range. We never tested the highs. So what's behind that? There's some offers
Inside the
behind
range.
that. There's that couldn't even be tested. They waited, and as I believe that was Europe opening when we broke it up.
Been Okay, so now Europe Open. D is in the chat, Paul's in the chat. What time does Europe open? Because we had,
We had
I
a
know they have
change of
daylight savings time over there, so I'm normally looking at 3 a.m. Eastern as my Europe Open, but what time should that be? I'm thinking it's 4 because we were talking about, so yeah, I think it's 3 a.m. Central Time. 3 a.m. Central Time. Amazing. Thank you,
okay.
Paul. All right.
All right.
So it's right here. Here's our open. And just a
Yeah.
reminder for anyone who's joining us, if you're trading the London session, Europe has this daylight savings time, apparently just for this week. So the London Open for this week is going to be an hour later than you're normally accustomed to.
Yeah, boy. Truly, time is relative.
It
It
really
truly
is.
is. Yeah, I mean, it really is. Um, so we don't go till at least here in Chicago. I don't know about New York. Now we have different states changing at different times. Um, but anyway, Europe came in, they started selling it, and it just cascaded. Um, by the way, United States is the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. It's massive. So we look a little further. I wasn't surprised. I didn't think we'd be that 8% lower. Um, I don't, the see, there's the U.S. Open you just framed out. Um, that's a tough trade. Now I look back at from this, while it was definitely a sell. Look, we opened far away from volume from last night. Now, what I didn't do.
What I framed out here, coach, is actually just some random high volume at 6:33 Central. The open is down
Okay.
here. So if you were waiting for the open, the market is already down, 5%. It's
Yeah.
that even tougher.
And even let's put a VWAP on the U.S. Open. And a little less dramatic, and it, and once again, we this pattern is playing out. The big action really happens overnight. By the time we open here in the U.S., it's a lot of times it's a smaller range. Um, so I've been thinking about this, and maybe I'll have to do it next week when I later in the week when I get home. Is I'm gonna get up and start European time, turn on um,
D show?
D, D show, and start trading then.
Yeah.
And I've done it before. I've worked I've worked around the clock in different trading desks. So this might be the time. Um,
I think trying to remember, but I feel like last October, November was very similar, right? I remember there was a time where we were talking about just ranges or yeah, the range expansion during that London session. And it feels like it was around the same time. I'd have to go back and check the charts, but I do remember a time last year where we were saying the same thing. We're getting consolidation, throughout the New York session, but range expansion during London. And if as traders we're looking for opportunity and some of the easier opportunities, if it that's the flexibility that we can enjoy with the schedule, right? Where if you have the time to, you could move things around and then free up your day.
yeah, cheerio. Move on.
All right. Not much else on that gas. Let's get into the equities then. Let's go to the Nasdaq. Um, Another market that gapped had a gap. In this case, a gap up. In the Nasdaq, we opened up with about a where was settlement? Not much of a gap, about uh
That-
0.15%. What's up, coach?
I have to laugh too. There was a gap up. It exploded on war news. Now, we talked about this Friday. If we knew missiles were launching, I'd say 80% expectation that it would gap down.
Right.
So don't trade expectations, trade the reality or trade the market.
For sure. For sure. D put a really important comment in the chat earlier. I don't know if you guys saw it, but make sure you hit that like button. But here is the Nasdaq. Um,
Nice. That was smooth.
Here's the Nasdaq. We have that 30-minute opening range, coach. We talked about it, before we got on here, but that urgency trade that we've been talking about, not really uh, seeing one in many of the markets that we trade. Um, the Nasdaq, I think if we pull up, yeah, this was kind of just an ugly day, to say the least. It presented an opportunity early on, I think, in the New York session where we got this float up above the range. VWAP tried to leave the range, but not very convincingly. And by the time we got into the New York session, we were selling back into that range. I think the cleanest opportunities came early on in the New York session. And then outside of that, I didn't really see too much in this market. We did get this kind of push up into 20,700 where we rejected last Friday. We remember 20,700 was that, 20,707 was the high of Friday's range. Kind of push up there unconvincingly, no volume, no buying, and then trading right back into that range. Here is the 3-minute opening range for the Nasdaq. I know Nick Fortick mentioned on Topstep TV that he's been looking at the 1 minute as well, which makes a lot of sense, especially with uh, more consolidated ranges that we're having. If you have a big opening range and you're looking for volume to leave that range, if the range is too big and there's no volume, it's not going to leave.
Great point. Um, and you're going to get that answer earlier and you'll have less risk. I think it's the three on a day trade for day traders. And I'm looking at, I used that 3 minute today too. I just didn't like the trade. There was no sense of urgency. I actually made no trades in equities, except for a longer term. I bought some puts for a longer term play, but boy, that was not an easy trade.
Was a day where it just required patience. Linus Rain just said it. It was a long hold day for me, shorted and held and got a decent $580 out of it, which is what today required, right? I think you heard Dakota on uh, Topstep TV. They got short in the house account right around 20,545. And the idea was filling the gap. Um, and, if you can put on a trade where you can manage your risk somewhere above the range, I think in that case, you would have to just widen the stop, and just say, you know what, I'm playing for this gap fill. I want to get in at a good trade location, but I also don't want to get wicked out of this trade before it eventually happens, if it's going to happen. Now we don't know that that gap fill is going to happen, but the worst thing would be, putting a 20-point stop in, getting wicked out, and then ultimately what you expected did happen. Now we didn't fill the full gap, uh, probably about 80% of it, and it happened on the last 5 minutes of the day. So definitely a day that tested your patience if you were trading the Nasdaq.
Patience was key. Um, and I don't have to say it again, but did we get a J trade down there with that high volume spike? Was that later today? Uh,
So there was, I don't,
no,
like you
we
said,
didn't.
you didn't trade the equities. I looked at
Yeah.
this and said, yeah, I'm good. I'm okay. I will trade it on a day where it presents cleaner opportunities to me. If you're a range bound trader, this is exactly what you want, right? We kind of had this channeling lower. I am looking at this high volume candle here, which was at 10 a.m. Central Time, kind of establishing a range, but it was
Well, it
more of a channel than a range. Go ahead, coach.
did stay under VWAP.
It did.
That part, um,
It did.
and there were
Actually, every
plenty of,
check of VWAP got rejected.
yeah. So what does that mean if we look at that? There is resting orders to sell, and that it wasn't big, but there's resting orders to sell, just based on VWAP from the open. Great day for scalpers.
For sure.
Um,
For sure. I think I want to go back to the S&Ps real quick because I think when you were on Topstep TV with Andre and Dolby, Andre actually mentioned that exact trade, right? Where, hey, view up is kind of sloping lower, um, and it's been holding. Do we just sell view up? And it would have turned out to be a pretty good trade a couple of times today. If we look at where your risk was a lot more above view up, sorry, below view up than it was above, right? If you got short below view up, you had a at most 2 point drawdown. Where if you were longing below it, there was about a 10 point drawdown and really no upside to this. So presented opportunity.
yeah. Um, as we talk, I'm not good at it. That's why I like a trend day. I didn't see that there. I really didn't trade much today at all. I made one day trade. I bought some Bitcoin. Um, and that gapped too, but we'll get into that later.
Yes, we
But
will.
overall, considering that it gapped up too, it was really a bland day. We can overanalyze it all we want. Um,
We'll move on.
we'll move on.
We'll move on because there's picking at straws there for sure. Coach, we got a question from Joe Sams. They say to make a living as a trader, you should have an edge. Do you agree? If yes, do I copy what other successful traders do to be successful instead of inventing the wheel of life?
Absolutely great question. Yes, you have to develop an edge. And what is an edge? Well, you have to have a plan of, and you know, you have to read the market and react to it. Now, What do I mean by read? You have to have a plan of action. I, as I tell my profiteers, can you bring your trading plan down to 4 steps? Then you have an edge. Whatever you're looking, one of them could be, I love the 3 minute in the equities, a 3 minute open with a VWAP for day trading. Um, then you have to frame out the risk so that you can take losses, because nothing is guaranteed. If someone tells you that, run the other way, hang up the phone, whatever. Um, Framing out uncertainty, that what is that uncertainty? That's risk. And back test it so you can get a feel of what can happen. Um, Without back testing, you're on the fly. So yeah, you could use someone else's, but eventually you're going to have to make the decisions. You're going to have to take the heat. You're going to have to take the responsibility of losses. Um, and I don't truly, you need to develop your own niche and borrow off of all the knowledge you can, and then develop a plan that you can execute. Because if you can't execute it, like you're not going to stay with the plan. Um, how about you, coach?
No, I agree with you. You can look at what other traders do, and you can try to emulate them as much as possible. But ultimately, we have to find what helps us get to decision making and simplifying that decision making. Like you said, coach, if you could narrow it down to four things, um, if I really looked at my trading, I draw a box, I draw a line. If the line leaves the box, take a trade. Right?
Yeah.
It could be that simple, right? So I think when you're borrowing from other traders or trying to figure out how other successful traders do things, find what helps you make a decision and don't try to replicate their results, right? Try to replicate their process, because everyone is going to be in a different place as far as results go. But listening to how someone gets to a decision and gets to making a decision and realizing it's a repeatable process over time is what I think everyone should try to get to, and then learning how to manage your risk. So, um,
Yeah. One other thing I would add, there's a mental edge that you need to develop too.
for sure,
You have to understand your personality. That's why, that's, coach, you said it well. You can replicate someone, but can you really replicate the results? You know, can you take the heat, or can you be that consistent? Um, that's an important edge too. So it takes time. This isn't a plug and play game, but if once you get consistency and you have an edge, you're on your way. But the key is consistency.
100%. Got another question here from Vladimir. What is your suggestion? I was planning to trade 2 hours in the London session and the rest in the New York sessions, but sometimes I have a conflict when some traders said it's too much. What do you think? Uh, why does it matter what anyone else says? If you have the mental capacity to trade both of those sessions and you find that the results work well for you, uh, then that's fine. I think the one thing I would be conscious of is the quality of your decisions. The longer you spend on the charts, um, if you find that your decision making quality is decreasing because you're spending more time on the charts, then consider that. But if you want to take one or two opportunities in London and one or two opportunities in the New York session, I don't see a problem with that. What about you, coach?
I would say I'm making plans to do it. So, but in your calculations, you have to give yourself time for at least 7 or 8 hours of rest. That means you're going to have to give else up at another place. You're going to be going to sleep a lot earlier, um, and you're going to have to adjust. But Yeah, it's very possible. I've done it before. Um, but what will happen too is, well, if it gets slow, you're gonna go, "Why did I do this?" Um, but commitment to it, I think it's a good idea. I wonder, how does D do it?
Superwoman. D, how do you manage trading both sessions? Where do you build in your breaks? Do you take breaks in between? I know D is probably not normally trading the New York Open, and I think a lot of times she's waiting for that initial balance, which is the first hour of the New York session trade, to to finish before she's looking at any trades. And there she says it, a power nap in between. It's important. Whatever they taught us in preschool and in daycare, where nap time was like just built into the day. Think there was a reason for it. And I love a good nap. Um, all right, let's talk about gold real quick, and then we'll get through the rest of the questions. Gold, another market that gapped down, gaps all over the place today. From the gap down, we have VWAP anchored to the session open. Another one that did not leave the range. We did close the gap in gold. We had measure this out. About a quarter of a percent gap down in gold, which has closed. And I think, yep, we're above the 200 moving average on the 30-minute, consolidating a little bit. And we've seen gold do this a couple of times before it breaks out. Here's another consolidation here. Then we start to settle below the 200 moving average. Looks like that's what is happening here. We know we do have some news coming out later in the week that could potentially give us some volatility across all the markets that we trade. But right now, looking a bit consolidated in gold, deciding what it's going to do around this 200 moving average. Anything else you have on gold, coach? You're on mute, coach.
Oh, you didn't hear
Yes.
me? You sure
There he
it's not
is.
your hearing? It's, um, you hit the word consolidation. Um, if we look at the 200, it's still edging higher. It hasn't gone negative. It hasn't looped around. Um, we have the braiding in the shorter term averages, which makes it, for my style of trading, makes it hard. I take it's a jab, jab, jab in the gold market. Still overall, um, bullish move. Still in a bullish mode. Um, this is why it comes back to managing risk, position sizing. Um, you put two or three big contracts in gold in this area, and you're not right. It's expensive. You're you're going to be gone. Uh, the jab, jab, jab is in your face, and you can't lift your arms if you've ever boxed. And you get to a point where if you haven't boxed, there's a point where if somewhere around the fight, if you're not strong enough, you can't lift your arms and you're defenseless. This this can happen in this kind of market. It's like you get you have no defense. Every time I put something on, if I'm over leveraged, I put it on, it's a big loss. Okay, well I got to get that back, and I put more on. Um, so maybe I want to start defining risk management as position sizing. Um,
I did want to say something about risk management where we see this 30-minute opening range. We have VWAP never leaving the range, not really
uh,
such a flat line, but kind of hanging out near the middle. And we've talked about where if this does look like this is the opportunity for a range bound trader to fade the extremes of the range. If we put the whole puzzle together and let's say you buy the low of this range and go with a 2 ATR risk on a 30-minute chart, your risk is all the way down here, right? So you do have a trade that's in a drawdown, but there are potential profits. And again, you don't want to me, if I'm trading a range bound market, I want to widen my stops. And if that's the case and it's a dollar wise too much, you could always trade micro gold. But allowing the market to, define what that range is. And sometimes it's going to be perfect and respect the exact lows. And sometimes it's going to run the low. Um, you know, the reason I think I hesitate to range bound trade is because of this, right? Where you keep your stop too tight, takes you out, and then goes the other way. Widening your stop to a point where the market is proven that it's not going to trade to, at least in this time frame, is okay. And then if it gets to that point, then it's just the wrong idea. It's no longer a range bound market.
Great point.
Any other markets we want to talk about, Coach? I know we did have a couple
Bitcoin.
of Bitcoin. Let's talk about micro Bitcoin traded above 70,000 for the first time since October 20th. Not that long ago.
Yeah.
But we're starting to push. Go ahead, Coach.
Let's start with the daily. Um,
Uh,
boy.
remember that trend line?
Yeah, that trend line, we closed above it. But we've closed above it before. But one thing with trend lines, how many times did we hit that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
A lot more recently.
And we can also call that a channel, a flag. You you say tomato, I say flag.
Going on.
Bitcoin is going up. A it's a bullish chart for me. Well worth trading the buy side. There's the 200. We're above that. Um, wow, I could call many different formations, but I want to trade the long side of that. And coming in this election, this could be the new gold. I don't know, but I still love that contract. I just don't know why more people don't trade it, um, especially for small accounts. Um, anyway, that's pretty bullish chart to me. Um, and we did finish near the highs of the day. That also gapped up if we go to the half hour.
So over here, we had about a 1% gap up, one and a
Yep.
half percent.
Now here's a gap. Here we go back to the low of the opening range, half hour range. And where did then we went back to the moving average all of them are right there. Um, so if we put the VWAP on the first, we got above the VWAP, and away we went. Um, now this is why if you're a day trader and you have these big opening gaps with big ranges, probably not a good place to find good risk parameters. Um, so letting it trade out a little bit, give it some time, as we see in here. Eventually, we get above VWAP. Eventually, we get above the 50%. Um, and find a good trade. If you wanted to buy that low of the range when we go back and give it, I don't know, one average true range. I wouldn't give it. See, I don't trade that way, but I would. You have to give it some room. Um, so do we see a J trade there? No. Um, but
Just lows of the
it's
range
being
holding.
it's being obviously it's being bought on every break. So I'll do the scouting report now. I want to buy the dips in Bitcoin.
Thank you for that, Coach. Looking at that 200 moving average on the 30-minute, 68 200, we'll call it. So maybe any pullbacks to there, but we may not even get one, right? 70,000 super psych level. Anyone who's trading Bitcoin knows when we're trading above 70,000. So be watching that major level as well. Uh,
And then all the voices will come out. The, the talk will be, they'll be screaming, "I told you so." But it took a lot of time. It's taken a lot of time. There's been a lot of whipsaw in this market. Um, I was brought up to let your game do your talking. Um, in trading, I believe in the same way. If you're, you know, you got to take your losses. If it rallies up through 70,000 and you're long, good, you should be, right? But overall, I think this market has big potential on the upside.
Thank you for that, Coach. So I thought my quote board had everything on it, but micro Bitcoin was actually the biggest percentage mover to the upside today. I think I said it was the Russell, but it was actually micro Bitcoin up 4.56%.
Well,
Got to save this template here. Now it should be on there forever.
there you go.
Um, let's see. We got some more questions in the chat. Tommy says, Coach Jay, using the fib retracement tool, why don't you use the 50% and 6.618 instead of just 50%? The range between 0.5 and 0.618 tends to be a reversal if it can't break. Uh, just a personal preference. Just a personal preference. I don't think I could say much more than that. I'm using 50% because I'm looking for a half back of a specific range that I've defined. But if 0.618 works, keep using it.
Yeah, it's the old school one, and I agree with it. Um, but I'm going to go back to a discussion we had earlier. If your trading plan, can you bring it down to 4 steps? And it makes it the decision making easier. Actually, I agree. I used fibs for many years. I used to do it by hand. I also did GAN, um, trend lines. But yeah, if that works, and then that's a very valuable thought. Um, and it if that works for you, and it does work over time, man, execute it. It's a good point.
Right, for sure. Let's see. We got another question. Is using a tight stop loss detrimental to most traders? Rather one to you,
Yes,
coach.
absolutely,
Paper cuts. Too many
hands
paper
down.
cuts.
Dying a death of 1,000 cuts, right? So why do I say that? If your stop is too close, means you're not willing to take the risk. Really is. I use to start with the two average true ranges, which is the average true range gives you the volatility, or another word for that is the vibration of the market at that point. If you're on a different, if you know, if the market's moving an average true range, this would be easy S&P of 5 points in your time frame, and you don't want to lose more than two. Okay, and then you put stops in it too, but it's naturally moving at 5. What's going to happen? You're going to get stopped out, and it gets very frustrating. And then you're chasing markets, or you're not there for the eventual um, move. I don't know if you play poker, but you have to ante up. And if you want to play in the $50 ante table, and you have $100 in your pocket, someone's going to call your bluff or going to bid you out. It's the same thing. So if you're getting stopped out a lot, yeah, the beauty was I put it on and I risk 4 ticks, and then it goes. But it doesn't work that way. Notice it. And one other thing that leads into position sizing. Give yourself a little more room and pare down your size.
I would agree with that. So we got some questions here, coach, on your 4 steps. We got Sandy asking, what are your 4 steps? And Paul says, so you mean 4 reasons to take the trade?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. To me, it's above the 200 and the time frame. VWAP is positive. Um, the overall trend is up. Whatever. I mean, define it for yourself. Come down. You know why? It's decision made. I mentioned it earlier on Top Step. OODA loops. OODA. It's a process for making decisions under pressure, developed by one of the top fighter pilots in the Air Force. Um, because when we talked about this before, when we look at a chart and go, shit, that's easy. If I just buy it there and sell it there, do that every time. But then you put the trade on,
Right.
and that's pressure. And when you your decision making process is too big, you're going to get lost. So you got to be quick, um, and you have to be repetitious. So you can be so it's so you can be um, uh, continuous in your thought pattern. If you have too many, then you're going to, I know I've done this. I overanalyze, paralysis through overanalysis. That's another problem. So it takes, it takes some time and some study, but I can't trade like Coach Jay. He doesn't trade like me. I've learned a lot. He's added from him, and I believe it's the other way around.
100%.
And then it becomes a flow of hierarchy. These are, of the four most important things. And then I focus on those. All right.
We got a couple of questions here. I don't know that there's any other markets that I want to talk about. Let's just do a quick scan of what might have moved. Yeah, I don't have anything else I want to talk about on these charts. Um, let's get to let's get to the questions. Taz Trader D answered this question already for you, but should traders be more aggressive in smaller accounts? D's answer: hell no. I agree. Um, no, do the opposite. Be aggressive when you can be aggressive, right? When that aggressiveness isn't going to cost you your account. Um, what other questions do we have here?
Oh,
I
I'll
already
add
answered this.
that.
Go ahead, coach.
Don't, this goes back to the four step. Don't be aggressive, be assertive. Those two different things. When you're aggressive, it can lead to recklessness. I learned this from coaching sports for many years. When you're assertive, you have a plan that you're executing. That's a really important difference. Don't be aggressive. You can get rewarded for that in a short period of time, but over a longer period of time, there'll be a time where it just turns into recklessness.
I already answered this question from Nelson, coach. Has there ever been a time that you wanted to quit trading? If so, how did you get over that hump? Yes, I have had that feeling. For me, I took 6 months off. You ever want to quit trading, coach?
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
Now, I've been involved in the futures industry since I was 19 years old. That whole time I didn't trade. When I had to learn how to trade, and I did that through the through the school of hard knocks. Like there's days where it's you can be in despair, right? At lead stage, you might be in that stage. It's a good time to take some time off and meditate on it. Go and look back and go back and see why is this happening. And this is why I go back to getting to a point where you have four pillars of a decision making. I'm looking for four things, and then go back to practice account, build it up, and get some insight. If you don't, and if at that point you still don't, there's nothing wrong. It's not for everybody. And um, it's a great question. And then, but take some time off. If you're not getting anywhere, you're probably trying to force it, and there is no power in force.
see. I don't see any other questions we have here. But if you have anything else, let us know. Coach, if you got any final words, I'm going to check my notes real quick just to make sure I haven't missed anything. Give me 1 second to pull those up.
Yeah. For a final thing is, I'm glad someone brought this up. This is a tough road you choose in trading. Um, Going back, and if someone would have told me at the beginning, you want to trade, well, okay. The one thing you can be certain of is you will always be uncertain, which I would have said, there's, well, first of all, you're lying. There's got to be there is none. Um, Next thing is, that's why I go back to developing a process that you can follow and execute. And in that, for me, the hardest part was I'm a guy. I come from, you know, I got to be right. I'm just not right yet. Okay, I'm tough. I can take a loss. Oh well, I could take a bigger loss. Oh, well, I can't take this loss anymore because the account is blown up. So just understand that you have to focus on a process. Learn from everyone, develop your own, and if you don't like it, then it could be the deciding factor. Like, this isn't for me, or you might find it like, oh, there it is. So that's part of this game, and that's why we're here to help and help you guide through it if you choose to keep going forward.
Okay, so we got a question from Scott Vaughn. Scott says we didn't get to his question. Um, we try to get to all of them. Covering micro ether, we've talked about it a couple of times here. It is a very slow market, uh, and one I think that we don't have many traders trade. I personally have never placed a trade in it other than trying to figure out exactly what the tick size was, and I could have done that, just using uh, the CME website to figure it out. It's not a market we cover often because I think it's a very low volume market from what I remember. Let's look at what micro ether traded today as far as volume goes. Uh, oh, traded 30,000 contracts today. Coach, have you ever placed a trade in micro ether?
Micro Ether traded 30,000 contracts.
That's what it says up here. That's new. That has not always been like that.
All right. Well, thanks for bringing that up. I, I didn't see your question, but I'm writing it down as we speak. I'll be watching it. Could be a good place. And I had here. I've traded everything, lumber to rough rice. I'll trade, but I have to familiarize myself with it and the terms and how it moves, and see how it fits in my trading process. But if it's trading that much, well, it's something that we can bring up, because I don't remember anything like that kind of volume last time we went through it. It was like more like a couple hundred, but things change. So yeah, I'll take a look at it and bring it up to us. Um, Heck, if it works, it's a good market. I, w- I hold no biases against it.
If it presents an opportunity, I will take a trade in any market that does. Sometimes there's too many to look at for a day trading purpose, but it's why I do quick scans. And like Coach said, can you narrow your trades down to four things? I think I've narrowed my trading down to at least, hey, this is going to present me an opportunity to those four things. So I'll add it to the quote board, and if it presents an opportunity, I'll look at it potentially to take a trade. Um, but we are at time. Coach, you got something else?
No, that's it. Um, mm, Thanks for being with us. And remember, before you leave, there's a button to hit if you liked it.
Hit that thumbs up. We weren't able to get to all the questions today, but if you do have a question, let bring it back, and we will try to get to it tomorrow. Alonzo, real quick, I see yours. How do you fade the extremes? Flat line here. Fading the extreme means buying the low, selling the high of a range. I want to thank everybody for joining. I'm going to put a link in the chat to trade with Topstep. If you have your 4 pillars of your trading defined and you want to show that off on Topstep TV, maybe trading with Coach Paul, fill out that form and you can get on Topstep TV and trade with the team. Outside of that, don't have any other updates. Um, Remember that we have coaches doing segments in Discord all the time. Coach Hoop at 4:30 Central, Coach Ray at 6, and Coach Vince at 7, and then of course Coach Dakota on slow markets at 7:30. He is back from the dentist. Uh, Made a little money from the tooth fairy, and he's back on slow markets. And then of course we have Deanna, who is doing the London session, I believe at the same time. Correct me if I'm wrong, D, but at 3:30 Central Time.
Central British Standard Time.
Who knows, Coach? Who
Throw
knows at
that
this
at
point?
you, man.
Um, but I think D is keeping it. I'm actually going to be on with D next week. I'm going to join D for same time Central Time. Okay, perfect. So 3:30 Central Time. I'm actually going to join D next week for a London session. So I'm going to get some good sleep on Sunday night. So I'll be up and ready for that. I usually don't have coffee that early, but I will definitely be having one. Thank you everyone for joining. Hit that thumbs up on the way out. Make sure you manage your risk, trade well, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.
All right. Goodbye.